Hello, and welcome to episode 157 of the Casual Try Hard podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm James.
And we are talking more Cube based on popular demand.
Yeah, thanks to all of the people that were asking about more Cube stuff. There was a bunch of you, so we'd figure we'd break down a little bit more of it for you. I'm sure we'll talk about Brian's Cube a little bit in all this, but today we're kind of talking the classics. Stuff that you can sit down at, like a cube at your LGS or a cube on Magic Online, and like things that are going to be present in some number.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about the upcoming like Kamigawa set or just Magic stuff in general, you can get those to us on Twitter at CasualTryPod.
Yep, you can also hit us up on Facebook at CasualTryHardMTG. Or you can email us, show@CasualTryHardMTG.com. I do check my email. I have gotten some emails lately, so that is still a good way to get a hold of us if you want to. I also had a couple people asking about what the email address was, so there you go, show@CasualTryHardMTG.com. I check it not every day, but a couple times a week, make sure nothing slips through the cracks. We also have a TCG Player affiliate link if you're looking to pick up any singles. I think in general the market's kind of quiet now, so if you're looking to pick up anything up for your own cube or deck you're building or whatever, use our TCG Player affiliate link, tcg.casualtryhardmtg.com, and you'll help support the show. We'll get a percentage of whatever you purchase off of that site to help keep the show going. And if you guys want to support us a little bit more directly, you can do so at patreon.com/casualtryhardmtg. Throw a couple bucks in the pot, you get access to our show notes, you get access to our pre-show, where we kind of talk about our everyday lives, a little bit of Magic stuff. Some of the stuff is a little bit more raw than what you get on the podcast. Kind of just bonus content. I usually throw that up for the patrons a couple days before the show goes live. And you also get put on my mailing list when I do the thank yous. Thank you.
Yes. Yep. And they're always very fancy. Always very impressive.
Yeah, this round's pretty cool. I'm proud of these ones. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I got to start working on that. We also have a Discord channel. There's a link in the description. There's a link on all our social media if you want to come join our Discord. Lots of cool people hanging out in there, asking questions. That's probably the best place to ask a question is in Discord. Quickest response time, I'll say, is in there. There's a bunch of different rooms. There's a room in there for show ideas if you got something you want us to talk about on the show. There's a room in there for deck help if you need help, tuning a deck list for FNM or for, grinding the arena ladder or whatever. You can post up. Like I said, there's a bunch of cool people hanging out in there too, so make sure you check our Discord out. I can't think of anything else we got going on. You got anything else before we start the show?
No, I was just gonna say though, I'm looking forward to you developing a large portfolio of like digitally altered Magic cards for when you decide you're just gonna become a graphic designer somewhere.
Yeah,
just be like, here's my portfolio. Look at all of these things I can do. People are like, oh, that's pretty impressive. You're like, no more cards for me, only computers now. Click, click, let's go.
Click, click, click. Yeah, I'm not quite that talented. I'm mostly ripping off artwork from the internet, so.
Hey man, that got people actual cards on actual art on Magic cards.
That is true.
So you're like 1 degree of separation from like what's Cameron's favorite artist, Mark Titus?
Oh yeah.
There you go. Like, you're almost there.
Yeah.
Mark Titus did not rip. Titus Littner, that's it. Yeah. I don't know. We mix it up, but yeah, that guy did not steal anyone's art, but just Right. So, with that said, your future as a graphic designer and me as a hunchback card sorter.
Coming soon to a podcast near you.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, this is like a huge departure. Like we're taking a hard right turn right now.
Okay.
I've got 8 hours in the car tomorrow.
Okay.
I think I've only got like 2 or 3 episodes of Receivables to listen to.
Okay.
What else should I listen to?
All right. So, I am an audiobook person.
Okay.
So, if you've seen the movie The Martian, you should listen to the book.
Okay.
It's way better. I know everyone says that, but like there's a big chunk in the movie from the book The Martian that gets cut out just for time. That's super interesting and I enjoy. Okay. There's also I do believe it's called the Murderbot Chronicles.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
I sell this to people a lot. It's on Audible. Let me look it up right now. Murderbot series. There we go. What is it called? The Murderbot Diaries. There we go.
Okay.
The premise is we're in space, and you are following this. They've developed these they're not cyborgs, but they're basically enhanced people that have had their free will taken. And this guy who calls himself Murderbot figured out how to break his governor, the thing that keeps him from makes him follow orders. But then he doesn't know what to do with himself. So he continues to work for the company, but he also just downloads tons of movies and TV shows. Okay. And just is watching those in the background. So it's his adventures, but they're all told from his point of view. And there's those times where he's just I'd much rather be watching media right now. Or yeah, so I was watching episode 372 of Star Hoppers, and then this thing popped up. So I had to pause it and save this idiot. And just but it's 3 books long, but it's I found it super interesting. And I always sell it to people if you're into sci-fi. It's the right mix, especially the first book. There's one book, then there's a novella, and then there's 2 or 3 more books at the end. But the first book is that right mix of action and comedy, and again the author does a good job of making you care about the character. You care about Murderbot.
Yeah.
And his internal struggle. So the Murderbot Diaries, what's the first one? Is all Systems Red is the first one, I do believe. Yeah. I think I've listened to all of them. I'll have to check with the wife because it's her Audible account, but I'm pretty sure I've listened to all of them.
All right, I'll have to check it out then.
Have you again another book that's way better than the movie? Ready Player One, the book.
Oh yeah,
infinitely better than Ready Player One, the movie, because he wasn't. So the movie's limited to Warner Brothers properties.
Yeah.
The whole first part of the book is a Dungeons and Dragons puzzle, relates to Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, cool.
And then, oh gosh, was it did you ever play the game Zork or Beyond Zork? It was a text-based RPG.
Oh, I played some of those, not that one though.
One of the things that he does is works through a 3D representation of a text-based game.
Huh.
It's interesting. And it's way more interesting than the movie, again, because you don't have this short time crunch. That's also one that I really like. I like that. I haven't done Ready Player 2, just because I thought I get this thing where I'm this might be why Magic is starting to pass me by a little bit. Where you see the first movie or the first book and you're that was great. I enjoyed that. I don't want to watch another one and have it ruined. See the Matrixes.
Yeah.
It's the first Matrix, perfect. The second Matrix, why? The third Matrix, the check couldn't have been that big. The fourth Matrix, really? Which, it was fine. It's another one that could just be movie with Keanu. Not the fourth Matrix.
I didn't really like the fourth one.
Yeah, it's fine, but again, so it's you have a certain expectation for the Matrix,
right?
And this movie was not the Matrix in any way, shape, or form,
right?
It was just a movie with Keanu that had random snippets and Doogie, and then like had random snippets from a really good movie you watched like 20 years ago. Yeah. But so The Martian the book, Ready Player One the book, and then the Murderbot Diaries.
All right.
Like the first book with all systems red, I do believe. Mm-hmm. It ends in such a way that you feel like there could be more, but you're like, I am fine with this just being one book. This is fine. Yeah. Like it's not like it it definitely comes to like a conclusion. You're like, okay. So yeah, cool. It's good. Like I know I've listened to it multiple times. So
right.
There you go. Same with The Martian.
Yeah, I got a little bit of receivables to catch up on, but I know that's not going to last me the whole car ride, and then I got a whole 8 hours home. So
yeah. So there you go. All right. Now that we've done car listens.
Yeah, the hard right turn. Now we're going to make the hard right turn to get back on track.
There you go. Our popper aficionado Brad, when we run out, you can audible to these things for your car rides.
Yeah, I don't plan on running out anytime soon.
All right. So, I mean, we only give him like 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week. When those 3 hours run out, like he's still got stuff to go, places to go.
That's true.
All right. Okay. Here we go. So, cube stuff. The thing we talked about before that holds true in all cubes, if they're put together well, is you are it's way more important to draft a deck that is cohesive and has the synergies that have been embedded for that color pair in the cube, like, than to just have like a rawly powerful deck. So like, yeah. So the example that always comes up when we brought it before is like everyone's first cube draft, they draft green-black stuff, right? Because every black removal spell is the best removal spell from the format it was in, right? And you're like, oh, I can't pass, Hero's Downfall into Fatal Push, into Bloodchief's Thirst, into Infernal Grasp. Like I can't pass any of these. These are nuts, right? And then you're like, oh man, there's Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy and Putrefy. Oh man, I've got this great deck that's got like good mid-range creatures. And then you play against someone that has this like super focused deck that's a combo deck, or has like, all these parts that go together and make everything way better.
Or they storm off on you in turn 3.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have so everyone falls into the trap of like, I just want to take good cards, but it really comes down to making a good deck. It's, you hear people that cube a lot say like, you're basically building a constructed deck. Mm-hmm. And now there's a lot of ways there's a lot of ways that constructed decks can get built. And one thing is in pretty much every cube, like the cubes I'm going to refer to, is I've watched a ton of, not so much this year, but I've watched a ton of Legacy Cube and Vintage Cube content from people playing on Magic Online.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comparison because that's probably the most accessible for people.
Yeah.
It's something that you can jump in on Magic Online for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I don't know how much a draft is.
Yeah, and also there's a ton of content out there because all of the content creators love Vintage Cube.
Yeah, it is super
pick somebody
fun.
And they've done coverage for it.
I would say that the people I have watched the most are probably LSV.
Yeah.
And Kenji. Mm-hmm. And then Caleb. Caleb D has done if you turn on his stream around Christmas, which I haven't in a while, but if you turn on his stream around Christmas, it'll just be 6 hours of him drafting Cube. Mm-hmm. Frank Lepore, there's a lot of VODs. He has not streamed or posted anything in a long time.
Yeah.
So, but like he also did a bunch of cube drafts, and each of them definitely draft the cube very differently, and are for the most part pretty successful. So it also shows you how, like, from the same pool of cards, you can, get different, like, end up with different strategies. And also, you might be like, well, I don't want to watch a cube draft from like 4 years ago. Like, the vintage cube hasn't really fundamentally changed that much.
Yeah, I'll add in like a few cards out of, recent sets, but for the most part, it's pretty stable.
Yeah, and like, the things that get added is like, instead of having Stormbreath Dragon, which is a 3 red, 4/4 flying haste dragon that has protection from red and like monstrous for like 7 that deals damage equal to the number of cards in your opponent's hand or something, right?
Yeah.
Instead of having that, it's now Goldspan Dragon, right? So a lot of stuff that end up in the cube are like, hey, this is a thing from the new standard set and we want to show it off, so we're going to put in this card. That, functionally equivalent to a card already in the cube. So if you find that you like watching LSV vintage cube drafts, you could watch them for the last like 5 years, and like the Storm archetype is still pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, it's not like they've written new Storm cards anytime soon.
Right, or new rituals. Mono white is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right, like the,
there's actually some new like mono white cards that are pretty good.
There are, but like in terms of like,
yeah, I mean, you're not getting rid of Thalia anytime soon.
Yeah, but for like a lot of things, it's like, it's like the same basic strategy again. It's like, this 3-drop from 2017 is complete and utter garbage by 2022 standards. So now it would be Welcoming Vampire and Skyclave Apparition, as opposed to being Fiend Hunter and Mentor of the Meek. Or I did that backwards, right? Welcoming Vampire is like Mentor of the Meek, and Fiend Hunter is like Skyclave Apparition. So like, there's changes like that where you get upgrades, but fundamentally the decks are doing the same thing. So in any well-constructed cube, you should be able to just basically pick all the cards in one color and end up with a deck. Right? So every cube has a mono white deck, a mono blue deck, a mono black deck, a mono red deck, and a mono green deck. And then the secret deck, mono brown. Right? So mono white in most cubes are your like little aggressive creatures, your Savannah Lions, and depending on like the cube, like Adanto Vanguard, Seasoned Hollowblade, those kind of things. Yeah. Right.
Classic white weenie
stuff. And then they usually have some sort of taxing element. So they'll have Thalia, or if they have, there's like the 3-drop taxing creature.
Yeah.
They might have that in there. There's some sort of disruptive thing element. A lot of times they'll play like Mana Tithe, because they're trying to like pinch you on mana for a turn or two.
Yeah.
They'll have
depending on like what kind of cube. Also, there's like Strip Mine Wasteland,
and then like Armageddon and Ravages of War. So like they'll try to be like go like 1, 2, 3. And then on 4, like, blow up the world. And be like, I'm going to hope that my 3 creatures can beat you before you do whatever your deck's trying to do.
Yeah, before you rebuild or whatever.
Right. Yeah, or like, I'm going to get ahead, blow everything up, and then hold on for dear life. And then they also will have a, like, an equipment package. Like, usually the decks that make the best use of the swords, because usually in Vintage and Legacy Cubes, you have the Mirrodin swords.
Yep.
Are, like, the white aggressive decks. They can go into other decks, but typically it's, like, the white aggressive decks are like, well, I have this Thalia, and I'm going to play a sword. I'm going to put the sword on the Thalia, and we're going to just ride this thing. And hope it's good enough kind of deal. So, like that's your mono white deck. Mono blue is like tempo disruption-y stuff, right? There's usually enough like 1 and 2 drops and then like counter spells. Like there's usually days, counter spell, things like censor, mana leak, remand.
Yeah.
I'm just basically rattling off most of the counter spells from my cube, right?
Memory lapse.
I don't have memory lapse in there because I'm not a monster. Maybe I should. I might not have enough counters in my cube, but that's a personal choice. It can be changed later. But as of right now, I want people's spells to resolve.
Hey,
but
Force of Will's an uncommon.
It is. It is not in the cube, but again, maybe it should be. But a lot of times you will have those disruptive elements like Spell Pierce and Fading Hope. Just like, your classic, like, probably blue tempo deck.
Yep. The mono blue deck can also skew control, too.
It can.
Like, if you don't want to play the tempo-y game, you can just counter, stick a giant draw spell when they run out of gas or, cast some monstrosity.
Yeah, Hullbreaker Horror, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is a vintage cube good enough card.
Yes.
Right. And then one of those decks that is not always great, but for some reason people love it, is the mono black deck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the thing that the mono black deck also like often leans into like devotion.
Yeah.
So, right, like its thing is like there's usually a lot of creatures in the cube that just have like ridiculous black mana cost requirements. So like you have Gifted Aetherborn, which is black, and then you have Phyrexian Obliterator.
Yep.
Which is
black.
Yeah. And then you have Grey Merchant. And so you're trying to like, play, your aggressive 1 mana 2/1s, Gutter Bones, Blood. What was the guy from Cons? Blood-Soaked
Champion. Yeah.
Yeah. Like these recursive 1 mana 2/1s, and then you have
Gifted Aetherborn.
Aetherborn and other like double black things. And then like you get your disruptive creatures where you have Mesmeric Fiend or Kitesail Freebooter, those kind of things. And like you're just trying to play all these things that have all these black mana symbols and then get paid off in some way, usually with like Grey Merchant. You have good removal, you have some interaction with like discard spells, and there you go. You've got you got yourself a stew going.
Yep.
Mono red is the burn deck, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just what you expect it to be.
Yep. You go 1, 2, 3, and you've got burn spells. I should mention mono white and mono red. Both usually want to have some number of creature lands.
Yeah.
So usually there's Mutavault or Mishra's Factory in the cube. Like those typically want to end up in those red or white aggressive decks.
Probably a little bit harder to get Faceless Haven, right? Because snowlands are...
Yeah, you can't put Faceless Haven in. So it's like Mutavault and like you could, like, depending on the power level of the cube, like Crawling Barrens would work. But it's usually like Mutavault and Mishra's Factory. Like, again, I put in together a peasant cube, so commons and uncommons. The white creature land is complete and utter trash.
Yeah, Foreboding Watchtower?
Yeah, it's like you activate it and it's a 1/5.
1/5, yeah.
So I have Mishra's Factory and I have Gitu Encampment.
Okay.
So I have the red one, but the white one's just so bad, like I couldn't justify putting it in. And then mono green is typically play elf ramp, play big thing off of your elf ramp, and your big thing can vary, like in vintage or Legacy Cube, it's usually Craterhoof.
Yeah, it's a great thing to ramp into.
They will often they'll have like natural order, so you can like do the thing that Elves does where you just natural order into your Craterhoof.
Yeah.
And win the game that way. But usually like any big thing, okay, fine, I'm going to ramp into an Eldrazi. Right? Like totally a doable thing.
Yep.
So those are all things that like if you sit down and you're just like, I don't know what to do, right? You could like one of the best decks in Vintage Cube is mono white and mono red. In terms of like if you want to sit down and like 2-1 or 3-0 your draft, you just draft mono red.
Yeah, I think I haven't played a ton of cubes, but the few that I have done, the White Weenie deck won. Like most of them, I think.
I remember losing to mono green a ton as well. Yeah. But like mono white and mono red, particularly mono red, is called the Fun Police.
Yeah.
Because in Cube, you're trying to do this big, fancy, crazy, all these big, fancy, crazy things. And mono red's just like, Jackal Pup and Eidolon into Chain Whirler.
Yeah.
Bolt you Lightning Strike. And you're like, oh, I'm at like 3. If they draw literally any card in their deck, I die.
Or they got an Eidolon out. If I cast anything, I die.
Yeah. And just like, okay, well, I guess I'm dead.
Yeah.
So, but those are always just like there. And like, it depends on the cube how strongly they're supported. Right? Like, I think like mono black in like the peasant Poppery cube is harder, right? Because you can't have Phyrexian Obliterator, right? There's not as many like, just like straight black casting costs.
Yeah, I think normally like in peasant, mono black kind of skews more towards like hand disruption. They play a lot more discard spells.
Yeah, I just have a ton of removal, so it ends up being more of like mono black control. There's like ways to draw cards and get value. But like it's going to be different for every cube. But for the most part, each color should have a monocolored deck that is like functional. And part of the reason it is like none of the cards are bad.
Right.
Right? Like the worst card in your cube is probably like the 10th best card from its draft format or something. Right. It's like, oh man, this card's not very good in Cube. It's like, oh, that was like the best card in, Odyssey Block Limited.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that was a long time ago. An Odyssey card sucked. Yes, they did, but it was the best one.
Yeah.
So always like know that's gonna be there. So if you like sit down and you're like, all right, I don't know what to do, like take the red cards. Like that'll work out for you. Or take the white cards.
You mentioned kind of briefly mono brown also.
Oh yeah, mono.
Talk about that here. Or?
Yeah, we can talk about it here. It kind of leads into like some of the classic archetype, the next classic archetype, which is like it's like a big mana deck. Yep. It's basically trying to take advantage of in the Vintage Cube. There's one, you have the Moxen, right? But you also have Mishra's
Workshop.
Mishra's Workshop, and you have Ancient Tomb.
Yeah.
So you have these like fast, like these accelerated mana things for artifacts or just to give you colorless mana.
Yeah. Do they put a Metalworker in Vintage Cube too?
There's Metalworker in Vintage Cube. Yeah. There's Metalworker Lightning Greaves combo.
Yeah.
Lightning Greaves equips for 0 and gives something hexproof and haste.
I think it's Shroud and Haste. Right?
Shroud and Haste. So you can like play Lightning Greaves on 2, and then Metalworker equip. Tap your Metalworker, show your hand full of artifacts, and get like 10 mana.
Yeah.
And then play a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Do whatever. Blight steal somebody.
Blight steal someone. There's the mono brown decks are often mono brown splashing blue. Because you get things like Tinker.
Yeah.
Right, where you're like, okay, turn 1, Soul Ring, Lotus Petal, tinker away my Soul Ring, get an Inkwell Leviathan. And you're like, okay, here you go. Right? Deal with this thing. And your opponent's on like a 3-turn clock, and if they don't kill your Inkwell Leviathan, you win. And like, if they have a Chainer's Edict, you lose.
Yeah.
This is the way of the world. Or you're like, Blade Steal you on turn 2, and they're like, swords. And you're like, well, that was fun. So usually, these are usually rampy decks that are playing all colorless things. They'll have some artifact synergy, so things like Tinker. Maybe they'll have Thoughtcast. Maybe they'll have Goblin Welder. They'll be blue-red or just red, so they'll have Goblin Welder and Duretti that are like red cards that want you to like bring artifacts in and out of your graveyard.
Trash for treasure.
Treasure. Things like that, where they're trying to, like, you know, the cards that are just like specifically like refurbish, you know, return an artifact from your graveyard. Okay, well, I gotta have artifacts.
Right.
So, but for the most part, the other thing that the artifact decks can be are upheaval decks. This is particularly in the Vintage Cube. Right? You play a ton of mana rocks that you can generate a ton of mana for. And then you play Upheaval, which is 4 blue, return all permanents to their owner's hands. So you tap all your mana rocks and make 12 mana. You use 6 of it to play Upheaval.
Yep.
Right? And then you use that 6 mana to start casting the mana rocks that you return to your hand. But then those mana rocks tap for more mana. So you're able to play out your hand and have all of these mana rocks, or like get a threat down.
Yeah.
And your opponent is probably going to pass the turn after they played a land and then discarded 7 cards.
Right.
Right. And so you're super far ahead. So the mono brown decks are typically, like I said, mana rock, big mana, doing stuffs. Which leads into like the ramp archetype, right? So, right, which is, like we said, mono green is typically the ramp archetype. It's elves and then the big things.
Right. I mean, not just elves, though. It could be any kind of mana dork.
Yeah, but they're usually like mana dorks, and then they have a couple, right? It's usually they're mono green, and then they will like oftentimes splash a color or two. So, like, Kenji likes to draft blue-green all the time. Right? So you have the green for the mana, right? And then the blue for interaction or, like, finishers. You're like, oh, a Hydroid Crisis for 6 is good everywhere.
Yes.
Right? A Hydroid Crisis for 10 is even better. Right? So, like, you'll be blue-green for, like, Hydroid Crisis, and maybe, like, you know, another draw spell, or, like, Blue Sun Zenith or something. You're like, okay, mill you out.
Or just back up.
Yeah. Or then blue-green also will be the Upheaval deck. Not Upheaval deck, I'm sorry. Well, it can be Upheaval, but Opposition.
Okay.
Where you have all these little creatures, and then Opposition is two blue, tap a creature, tap a permanent. So all of your creatures become free icy manipulators.
Nice.
So you play Opposition, and you've got all these mana dorks, and you're like, okay, on your upkeep, tap all your lands. Go. And now your opponent has no mana, and then you just grind the game to a halt until you play some finisher.
Right.
Terastodon is also a card that shows up a lot in cubes.
Yeah, Scary Terry.
Yeah. Nasty Terasti. You, what is it? It's 6 green for a 9/9, and you can destroy up to 3, non-creature permanents.
Yep, non-creature permanents.
And then for each one you destroy, you make a 3/3 elephant. So you can blow up 3 of your opponent's things, and then they have enough elephants to kill your Terastodon. Or they have, 6 power of elephants that you can't block with your Terastodon. Or you can be like, I'm going to blow up 3 of my things, and now I have 18 power. Ooh. Your go. Right? And you just like cross your fingers that your opponent doesn't have like a Wrath, and then you try to ride your Terastodon to victory. But like you're going big. So and then, or you can be like green red and like fireball people.
Yeah.
Green
the
white.
Channel fireball.
Channel fireball. In the Vintage Cube, channel is a big thing. So green, you can pay life, and for each life you pay, you get 1 colorless mana.
Yep.
So that lets you like Ulamog people on turn 2. You're like forest, channel, pay 10 life, exile both of your lands, go. Oh, yes. And I have a 10/10.
That's gonna mill you 20 cards.
Yeah. So in your 40 card deck, I will kill you 2 ways. You will have no life, and you will have no cards. So I mean those games. So a thing to remember about Cube is, as I'm talking about like Ulamogs on turn 2, is there are definitely games where you don't play the game, right? Especially in powered cubes. Your opponent's like, turn 2, storm off, kill you. Turn 2, Ulamog you, right? In those games, sometimes you just have to be like, wow, that was really cool that happened, right?
Yeah.
But for every game like that'll happen to you, but then you're also going to be on the giving end, right? And you
That's
just have
kind of the point of Cube too. Yeah,
you just kind of have to realize that like we're both going to be able to do big, flashy things a lot of times. Hopefully. So sometimes I'm going to do the big, cool thing, or other times my opponent is. Or you're like playing mono red, and you're like, you're going to get to turn 4 if you're lucky, and then you're going to die. And so your big, flashy thing is just deading them before they get to do any of their stuff. So there's a give and take to it. So we already went over the artifact decks, but most of the ramp. So depending on the cube, right? There are some cubes that work really hard to make sure all the ramp is green, right? That they don't have a lot of mana rocks. The Vintage Cube has a ton of mana rocks. So like,
it wouldn't really be the Vintage Cube if it didn't have the Moxen and Aloris, which is a bunch of mana rocks.
But like, it also has the Signets.
Yeah.
Which you don't realize how powerful they are, but they're super powerful.
Yeah, so it usually has Sol Ring too, right? And Mana Crypt.
Sol Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault.
Yeah.
All of the Signets. And has like Hedron Archive, Mind Stone.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. So like, you do end up with a lot of ramp in like colorless and in green. But there are some people that are like, I want green to be the ramp color. I'm going to like be like sparing on the mana rocks so that I only get acceleration in green because that's how I want like my cube to feel. Yeah. And so that kind of depends. But usually green and then mana rocks. Because what the mana rocks do is they make any color a ramp color, right?
Right.
If you take like 6 mana rocks, you can be blue and play Consecrated Sphinx on turn 4.
Yikes.
Right? And then you're like, yeah, right? But if someone's like, I don't want that to happen, you're blue, you shouldn't get to do that. They can like not put the mana rocks in.
Right.
So, all right. Now you have the sad archetypes.
The other fun police.
The other fun police.
Yeah.
Which is
the control decks.
Yes.
Normally there's a blue-white control deck. I would imagine with Teferi in it.
Yes.
Wrath of God, stuff like that. Counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like I alluded to when you were talking about the mono blue tempo deck, there's usually some sort of mono blue like control deck also.
Yeah, where like again, like you could be mono blue and have mana rocks and upheaval someone, or just counter a bunch of stuff, and then like you said, just play big dumb idiot.
Yeah.
Or in Hullbreaker's Hullbreaker Horror's case, he's a very smart idiot. He's like, yeah, I'm big and I'm smart. I'll bounce your thing. So
Tight spout tyrant.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard, right? Like, blue by its nature, right, has card draw and, like, stack interaction. That's just what it has, right?
Right.
And that's what you need for a control deck. Black has a bunch of removal. White has, like, general removal and sweepers.
Right.
So, like, you always just kind of fall into there being some sort of control deck, usually in every color but green. Right? Like, you could see yourself being, you know, a blue-red kind of control deck that, you know, has, like, 3 dragons as finishers. Or you're a Jeskai because you got, you know, Banishing Light and Swords to Plowshares and a couple other, like, and a Teferi in white, and you got the counter spells and card draw in blue, but you were short a little bit more removal, and you were like, oh, I got, like, a Lightning Bolt, a Lightning Helix, and, you know, a Searing Blaze. Electrolyze, yeah. So I got those. Yeah. So, like, this is, like, I'm going to be Jeskai. So it's kind
Staticaster.
It's current, like, legacy, like, all-star sideboard card.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely got blown out by Izzet Staticaster once or twice.
Yes. Yeah, I just had a bunch of Narcomoebas that never got to see the light of day.
Yeah.
Narcomoeba. Zap it. Dang it. But you definitely have the, oh gosh. Like, you have, like, it's blue-white X a lot of times. Or, like, blue-black, blue-white, or blue-red. It's, like, somewhere in there. I mean, and depending on the build, like, some of the best, like, legacy control decks now are, like, Bant. Right? Because you get
Crazy world we live in.
Because you get, like, Uro and Oko and Endurance. Right? Like, in the Vintage Cube, those cards are all, like, in the cube and it's go time. Right? So, you know, you could be Bant, where you're like, okay, like, I have Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, and Sphinx's Revolution, not Sphinx's Revolution, Supreme Verdict.
Supreme Verdict, yeah.
Yeah, and I've got, like, Oko and Uro, and a couple other, like, green cards, like, you know, I've got
Veil
Beast Within, or Veil of Summer, right? And now...
Primal Command.
Yeah, and I can combine these things with my blue card. So there's always a control deck somewhere. Right? There's some way to put it together. I think my experience, I haven't played the Arena Cube this time. Because the last time I played the Arena Cube, I didn't enjoy it. Yeah. Because it felt like all the decks were the same. Where it was like, they were all kind of like control, go big mush piles. Yeah. Like, they didn't really differentiate themselves a whole lot. There was like, it kind of broke down like Standard broke down. Where it's like, hey, there's a bunch of like aggressive decks. Mono white, mono red. And then there's like, you know, the Agent of Treachery deck. Yeah. Like, you're going really big with sweepers. And then you're just going to, like, bury your opponent. And it's like, can I play a 3-drop creature? No. You cannot. But it gives me such value. You're dead. You can't play a 3-drop. It's like, okay. Yep. Right, so there's just, like, that... It kind of mirrored Standard too much, where it was all, like... You know, all the 7 and 8 mana stuff is so unbelievable, and it's so easy to get there. We're just going to do that. So, but there's always... I mean,
that kind of makes sense, though, because that's all that's been on Arena is, like, that type of format.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, like, maybe it's different now that you have access to, you know, the bane of my historic existence, like, a third of, like, Modern Horizons 2.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, maybe that has changed it some, but for the most part, you know, I haven't tried. But, like, that format very much felt like it was... Like control and ramp decks kind of mushed together, right? Where you're like controlling the early turns and then just like going over the top and getting a huge advantage. Yeah. So you have on here like there's usually some sort of like Aristocrats deck. So Aristocrats, if you don't know, comes from, I guess it was like RTR standard.
Well, it was Innistrad with like Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Oh, it's Falconwrath Aristocrat, like, because there's also Cartel Aristocrat that kind of does the same thing. Basically, like a sack outlet, and then creatures that die
into some sort of value.
Into some sort of value. Either they deal damage, they draw cards. They usually die into other creatures.
Yep.
So you might have a thing where you have a Blood Artist. It's like, oh, when something dies, I deal 1 damage. And then you're like, oh, I have this creature that dies into one creature and then dies into another. So I can get 2 drain triggers off my Blood Artist if this dies, if with this 1 card. So you do, like, you chip in for some damage, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to sacrifice 4 things and deal you 8 damage.
Yeah.
And I'm going to win the game that way. So we've all played against a Mayhem Devil, like the poster. Yeah. So there's the like red-black deck. Well, the Aristocrats deck can be red-black, kind of built on. It's usually black, so it can be
white, black, or red, black.
Exactly. White has a multitude of creatures that die into something else.
White's pretty good about like bringing cheap creatures back to the battlefield also, which is another reason to be white.
Right.
The Sun Titan effect.
Yeah, or what's the... I cut it from my cube. It's for Modern Horizons 2. It's 2 and a white, and it's like bring a 1-drop from the... It's an enchantment that at the end of turn you can bring a 1-mana card from your graveyard to the battlefield, or you gain a life.
Yeah.
Like it's just a card that says, put me in Martyr proc.
Right.
Right, but... like, you can have effects like that are just going to constantly bring back creatures. So black is usually good at giving you ways to sacrifice your creatures either for no mana cost or low mana cost, and ways to turn those creatures dying into advantage.
Yeah.
So Blood Artist, Bastion of Remembrance from Ikoria.
Yep. It's also pretty good about turning them into other cards.
Yeah,
like Morbid
Morbid Opportunist from what was that Midnight Hunt, I do believe.
Yep.
So black usually is your payoff in your enablers, and then white and red oftentimes give you the food.
Yeah.
Red oftentimes in the form of like tokens, or depending on how the cube is built, like you could have active treason. Claim the Firstborn. Like, you could have a bunch of threaten type effects that are going to take your opponent's creatures, and then you're going to eat them. So they're more along the lines of like a removal spell. Right? Or it's like, I'm going to play Hordling Outburst and Krenko's Command and Dragon Fodder and make a bunch of tokens and then eat all of those tokens.
Yeah.
So, much like white's like, here's a 1/1 that dies into a 1/1. So you get 2 sacks out of 1 card. Red oftentimes does that by here's...
Making 2 tokens.
Yeah. 1 card turned into 2 things. 1 card turned into 3 things.
Yeah.
Right, because red doesn't have a lot of things that die into other things.
Right.
I say that in, what's his name? Well, Annex, and then, what's his name's raising his hand right now? The stupid 1/1 first striker that dies into an army token.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I forget what he's called, but...
Grim something.
Yeah. Grim Initiate?
Grim Initiate, yep.
We did it. And you mentioned, good old, what's Annex? And I'm like, oh yeah, Annex isn't in my cube. How do I find space for him? Like, that's really selling the mono red deck short. That's another thing is like making a cube. Like you get so many like ideas and things. You're like, oh, I could do that. And you're like there are only 540 cards. I can't do all of it. Right. So and that's another thing, we're kind of a little over the place, but like as you draft a cube, like I think drafting a cube once is super hard.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how well the different monocolored archetypes are supported, or you don't know how well the white-black sacrifice deck is supported, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, there's definitely some cards here for white-black sac, right? But you don't know if, like, you've seen the best ones, or if someone else is in it, or if it's just not well supported.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that the cube experience gets better the more you draft the cube.
Yeah.
Because you can be like, oh, I know that this thing is in the cube. Or I know that this archetype is good. Or I know that these are the cards I really want if I'm going to be in this archetype.
Yeah.
Right? Another thing real quick that LSV talks about is you have to trust the person that made the cube.
What do you mean by that?
If there's Splinter Twin in the cube, right?
Okay.
You have to trust that the person who made the cube also put Pestermite Deceiver in the cube.
That's a pretty mean trick to play on somebody if you don't.
But the point being is that, like, if I put a combo card in, right,
Yeah.
the other half the combo's in the cube, right? That you're not putting Splinter Twin in the cube for value and not putting in the combo, right? So, like, you have, right, if there's Kiki Jiki, right, you're like, oh, okay, there's Splinter Twin, there's probably Kiki Jiki, and there's probably the 3 or 4 creatures that go with them.
Right.
Right? Because, like, I don't have Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite in my version of the cube because there's nothing that goes with them. And
there's nothing in uncommon?
There's nothing in uncommon.
All right.
I've built in other Splinter Twins that are, like, green-white, but I don't have, like, there's not, like, just a Splinter Twin. But, right, there's no reason for those cards to be in the cube. Like, if you see Pestermite and Deceiver back-to-back and you take them, you should feel fairly confident that Splinter Twin and Kiki Jiki are at least in the cube. Maybe you don't see them because someone else drafts them, or they don't come out of the box because it's a 540 card cube, and you only need 360 to do an 8-person draft, so a third of the cube is always, like, chilling.
Yeah.
Right? And then, but, like, you have to trust that those cards are there. So if you see a combo piece, you have to trust that the other piece is there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That you're not just getting, like, screwed.
Yeah.
So, if you see Ivy Lane Denizen, it's there because it does shenanigans. And the shenanigans... Because I Googled, like, Pauper Infinite combos.
Oh, yeah?
Ivy Lane Denizen's just busted.
Yeah, what else is a combo with?
Any sack outlet and a persist creature.
Oh,
because it puts the +1/+1 counter on anything.
Yeah.
So, like, sack outlet plus Ivy Lane Denizen plus, like... Oh, what is he called? Oh, gosh. I'm blanking. Kitchen Finks. It's just infinite life.
Mm-hmm.
So there are just a bunch of, like, other things it does. So you, like, kind of have to trust that, like, if you see Ivy Lane Denizen, there are shenanigans possible.
Yeah.
Because that is a card that lends itself to shenanigans. Just Makes like, sense. I'm trying to figure out how to put, was it Freed from the Unreal?
That's the enchantment that untaps?
Pay a blue, untap.
Yeah.
Enchanted creature or tap enchanted creature.
Yeah.
The only thing I have in the cube right now that works is Gyre Engineer. Because that Gyre Engineer taps for blue-green.
Yeah.
So with Freed from the Unreal, or Freed from the Real, it makes infinite green mana.
Oh.
Because you use the blue to untap it, and you just make green.
All
but
right.
I was like, I feel like I would need another creature, and I don't have another slot for a creature right now. Like, it's in the back of my head. I'm like, there's a maybe box. Right, but you have to trust that, like, if you see Freed from the Unreal, like, that's not a card, or Freed from the Real, that's not a card that's just, like, in the cube because the person typically is not like, I love this card so much. It reminds me of my youth. It's like, no, it's in here because shenanigans.
Right.
So if you take it, then you should, like, anticipate that hopefully you'll see the shenanigan that goes with it. So, That's just something to keep in
goes
mind.
The other way too, though. Like there's some cards that are just staples.
Yes,
and while they may be combo cards, they're also just good cards.
Yeah, they're just cards that are in there.
Resto Angel.
Yeah, like
is definitely part of Kiki combo, but could also, just be a good card.
Yeah, like it definitely it's like, oh, I am the quintessential like blue-white blink archetype thing.
Yeah.
And I am also the Kiki combo thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like a generic like thing blue-white control can play. Like, oh, you didn't do anything this turn? I did not. Cool. Flash and Resto. Now there's a clock. Let's go. Right?
Wasn't Resto Angel just reprinted at Uncommon?
Was it? I did not look. If it was, like, it needs to be on the team. There's definitely a home for it. It has a spot. But I thought it was. I didn't know if it was. I did not look.
I thought it was. Oh, maybe not.
We as the entire podcast comes to a grinding halt.
Yeah.
To see
no, it wasn't. It was a special rarity in Time Spiral remastered.
Yeah, so it doesn't count.
Uncommon. Yeah.
But yeah, like you just kind of have to like hope those things are there. But yeah, there are definitely cards that are just in the cube.
Yeah.
Because they are good, but they also happen to be part of another another combo. Another like archetype is some sort of go wide archetype. There's not really a tokens archetype in like the vintage cube.
Yeah.
But like,
what's the green white archetype in vintage cube?
I just want to say being bad, but
well, I mean that's the case like in basically any draft format, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it is typically, because like green ends up just being so ramp heavy. Like the green white card that like I immediately think of is Mirari's Wake,
which is a ramp card.
Yeah, which is just like go really big.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what the green white archetype typically is, but like tokens can be usually green white or green white or red white.
Yeah,
is your traditional like tokens archetype, just like in like a regular draft.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that. There's sometimes things like Overrun,
mm-hmm.
which is like, what is it? 2 green. Give all your creatures +2/+2 and trample.
Is it +2/+2 or +3/+3?
Maybe it's +3/+3. It just ends the game.
Yeah, basically.
But like you'll have stuff like that where you're just like, okay, pump them up real big. But the vintage cube, like the power level of the cube makes that archetype kind of hard.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, making a bunch of 1/1s and your opponent's like, playing giant stuff and like taking all of the turns or any number of things. So I think that like I have a red white kind of tokens theme in like, I think it's like a pauper or peasant like power level thing, but not like powered cube.
Yeah,
I think that like you could do like an arena cube version of it, and that would be fine. But I think like if other stuff gets too powerful, I don't know how powerful that archetype is.
That's true. Makes sense.
Mill, I guess mill can be a thing. Like if you think about like all the different times that mill has been like an archetype, doesn't happen a lot though. Like again, like thinking vintage and legacy cube, like they don't usually have specific mill cards.
Well, I mean, isn't the kill condition for Storm a mill card?
One of them.
I mean, I guess that makes it a Storm archetype and not a mill archetype, but
yeah. So we've mentioned Storm a couple times, and so we should probably talk about it because we just keep going back to it. So Storm is one of the vintage cube's sacred cows.
Yeah, it's always there.
It's always there. It's basically not got a card printed for it in like 12 years. Right?
Well, they don't print Storm cards anymore.
Well, they don't print cards that say Storm unless it's Chatterstorm.
That's true.
Or Galvanic Blast. Not Galvanic, but Galvanic, whatever Relay, right? Unless it's Modern Horizons 2, because there are no rules. But for the most part, it's the same, like, it's a combination of spells that generate mana, so your rituals, which they haven't printed, like, a good ritual in literal years.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
Going through cards for my cube, Pyretic Ritual is from M13.
That was the last one.
I think that's the last one at common and uncommon. Yeah. And like they printed Ironcrag Feat, but they made it so you can't storm off with it because you can only cast one more spell.
Yep.
Right? So they don't really print rituals, but it's a combination of rituals, so typically Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual. What's it called? Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual. Desperate Ritual in red. Pyretic Ritual. Desperate Ritual. Seething Song. So all of these, it's like 1 mana to make 2, 2 mana to make 3, 2 mana to make 3, and then 3 mana to make 5.
Yep.
Right? So you have these ways to generate mana, then you have like free spells. So those are things like Manamorphose, right? It's 2 mana to make 2 mana and draw a card.
Right.
Gitaxian Probe, pay 2 life, like pay Phyrexian mana, draw a card.
Yeah.
Gush, return 2 islands to your hand, draw 2 cards. So ways to get cards, and then then cards that say Storm that copy themselves for each other spell that were cast that turn.
So all of the rituals that you played and all of the cantrips that you played.
And then there's Brain Freeze, which has Storm, target player mills 3.
Which is limited. You don't need very many spells to kill with.
Yeah, so that's like 10 or 11 spells.
Yeah.
Tendrils of Agony, 2 black, deal 2, gain 2. So you need 10 spells for that, or 9 plus then the Tendrils makes 10. Grape Shot takes 20. It's deal 1. So that's hard mode. But sometimes you can like Grape Shot to do a little baby storm off and control the board. Like kill 3 things.
Shoot down some creatures, yeah.
Yeah. Now build my hand back up and then try again with like another win condition. And now there's Chatterstorm, which makes a 1/1 squirrel. And then there's Empty the Warrens that makes 2 goblins with Storm for 3 and a red.
Yep.
So you have ways to make mana, ways to draw cards, your Storm payoffs. The other thing you often have are cost reducers. So in
like, is it Goblin Electromancer?
Goblin Electromancer and Baral in the Vintage Cube.
Yeah.
In the old versions, things that could be in there now, or that is in my cube, is Goblin Anarchomancer.
Yeah, from Modern Horizons.
Modern Horizons, right, reduces the cost of red and green spells. So all of your rituals become 1 to make 2, or 1 to make 3, or 2 to make 5. Which, like, over the course of, like, a storm turn, like, you can generate 4, 5, 6 extra mana. And then a throwback is, it's the black card. It's 1 in the black from, like, Plane Shift. What is it called? It, like, reduces the cost of red and blue spells.
Oh, yeah. There was a cycle of them, right?
Yeah, it's like
Night Familiars.
Nightscape Familiar.
Yeah,
there we go.
That's what it is.
So like that, you can have that as well. So you can have cost reducers plus rituals, and then the other thing that you can do is if you're really heavy blue, you can play High Tide.
Oh,
which makes all of your islands tap for 2 mana.
Yeah.
And then you play things like Frantic Search, which is draw 2, which is 2 and a blue, draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. Cloud of Fairies, 1 in the blue for a 1/1 flyer, untap 2 lands. Turnabout, tap, pay 4 mana, and you can tap or untap creatures, lands, or artifacts target player controls. So you're like, okay, High Tide, tap my 3 remaining islands, get 6 mana, untap my islands, tap them again, now I have 10 total mana.
Yeah.
Right, so it lets you go up in mana really fast. So now, helpfully, you can draw cantrips in your other rituals and stuff, and have ways to fix your mana. So, like, that is now. I say that as like the Sacred Cow. It doesn't go away, but it's also typically bad. Like, people draft it because it is really fun. The problem is it's also really difficult to play. Right? Like,
yeah, I think also, like, because it's so much fun, people tend to fight over a little bit too, right?
Yeah, it's one of those archetypes that, like, if it's wide open, congratulations.
Yeah.
Like, you've done it. But people really enjoy it, and so people will sit down and be like, oh, there's a ritual in this pack, and a Swords to Plowshares. I'm going to take the ritual because I want to play Storm today.
Yeah.
And they'll take the ritual, and then that was not the right choice. Right? Like, and then someone else might be like 3 picks into their pack, and there might be another ritual, or like a Tendrils. Like, oh, I'm just going to take this Tendrils and try to do this. And now you got
take it just in case Storm's open.
Yeah. Well, if I see some rituals, then I'll take then I can like pivot into Storm. And so you might not get your win con, which if you listen to LSV, win cons don't matter. I once saw him storm off, make infinite mana with a Palinchron, and use it to kill someone by repeatedly bouncing a Siege Gang commander and then throwing goblins at them. Because his chat was like, but you don't have any win conditions. Like, you don't need win conditions. I will 3-0 this draft with only garbage. Like, point was like there was a Tendrils or a Brain Feast or a Grape Shot, and he was like, I'm not taking it. I'm going to prove a point. And then just like Palinchron and then bounced this stupid Siege Gang commander a million times and won that way. And it's just like, okay, cool. I would suggest getting a win con unless you're trying to like do it on hard mode.
Yeah, I'm not LSV.
I am not LSV either. But right, that's like and so it gets fought over, and then people will draft it when it's not open. Like, not even because it's fought over, right? Maybe not all the cards were open that you were supposed to like,
right?
That you needed, and you get like half a Storm deck and half a control deck. That doesn't work. You have no deck.
Correct.
Right? Like, Storm is a deck that you have to have all of the pieces for.
Yeah, you definitely need to be all in.
Yeah, it can't be like, I've got all the rituals and all the card draw, but then not the Storm cards. Or I have 3 Storm cards and no rituals. That's probably not going to work. Yeah. So it's a really hard archetype, but it's also one that people enjoy playing. You see it a lot on streams because people like to watch people play it.
Yeah, it makes for good content.
Yeah, so people will always draft it, even if they shouldn't.
Yep.
So while it is
So could you say that Storm is the Saffron Olive?
It's a Saffron Olive.
Cube. It just makes for good content.
It just makes for good content. Yeah. Speaking of good content, and speaking of Saffron, released a video today. He called it Big Brain Bruce that didn't get there.
Yeah.
And he played, oh gosh, I forget what it's called. Like 2 and a green, like transform all humans that can be transformed.
All right.
So he's playing a bunch of like of the transform cards that have like, you know, random transform conditions. And then he played a bunch of the flipped planeswalkers.
Oh. All right.
Okay. And so he gets a bunch of stuff down, and he's like, oh yeah, we're doing it. And he casts a spell, and all of his flipped planeswalkers went to the graveyard. Because if you remember the flipped walkers...
because they have to exile and then return so they get loyalty counters on them?
Yes, so none of his planeswalkers got loyalty. So he won the game because he made... This was in Modern. He made an Ormondal from the
Blade?
No, from the black creature that makes a 1/1 that, like, if the 3 humans
the
die...
new one.
Yeah. So he made an Ormondal and won the game. But he... killed like 3 flip walkers, and then went to
Lily and Ashandra.
Yeah, and went on to explain like why it happened. But he was like, "Yep." So that was the only game I recorded with that because it didn't work. He's like, so sometimes if you think like I have this really cool idea, why is no one doing it? They probably thought about it.
That's why,
and then realized it didn't work.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So. Yes, that is Storm. Sometimes you play it, and you realize halfway through, like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Oh, the other Storm card that you get in Vintage Cube is you get Mind's Desire.
Ooh.
And Mind's Desire, you actually build that deck kind of differently. Because you end up putting a bunch of, like, big dumb things in your deck.
Yeah, you need hits for the Mind's Desire.
Yeah. And you're... Sometimes sometimes you build it like a regular Storm deck, and you're like, well, I'm going to Mind's Desire into rituals and cantrips and hopefully a Storm finisher.
Yeah.
But other times you're like, I'm a Mind's Desires deck, and I'm going to have 4 Eldrazi, and I'm going to hope to Mind's Desire into an Emrakul. And then that's how we're going to win.
Leads us into the next archetype that I wanted to talk about, which is Sneak Attack or Through the Breach or something along those lines.
Oh, yeah. So the secret non-monocolored best deck in Vintage Cube is probably blue-red Sneak Attack.
Yeah.
So this is an archetype that like LSV and Gabby and Marshall draft a lot, right? Because it gives you the good, cheap red interaction, right? Lightning Bolt, Lightning Strike, Abrade, those kind of things. With the cheap blue interaction, Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm, Counterspell, Remand, Daze, those things, right? But then it just kind of has this combo finish tapped on. So, right, what's good about being in like blue and red initially is that deck has a lot of ways to go, right? Yeah. You could be low to the ground, blue, red, Delver stuff. You could be blue, red, twin. Or you could be blue, red, Sneak Attack, right? So Sneak Attack, 3 and a red for an enchantment. You pay R, you put a creature onto the battlefield, and it gets haste. But you have to sacrifice it at the end of turn? No, return to hand. Or does it return to hand? I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember now.
Through the Breach is sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, you get like a 1-shot with your creature.
No, you sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step.
Beginning of the next end step. Yep. So you get like a 1-shot with your creature. So a lot of times you'll use it for things like the Eldrazi, right? You're like, get this down, pay a red, Emrakul you, right?
Annihilator trigger, hit you for 15.
Yeah, blow up 6 things, good luck, right? Sometimes like you do things like Big Atarka.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It's an 8/8 that comes into play and deals 5. To like any number of targets, so you can like wrath their board, hit them for 8, give yourself some time to like find more things. Yeah, your next thing. But you're doing all this like super cheap, and so
1 red mana.
Yeah, 1 red mana, and Through the Breach is like your backup. The trap is don't play Show and Tell.
Yeah, why is that?
Because in Cube, everyone always says your opponent always puts something better than you.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
Right, like in like Legacy, like your opponent's playing like Delvers and Uros that are gonna go to the graveyard and stuff, and you're just like Emrakul you.
Yeah.
Right? Or Grizzlebrand draw 7. Right? Yeah. Your opponent can't keep up with that. In Cube, like, hopefully you have one of those things, right? But your opponent's gonna have more just like random things that hose you. Right? You're like Emrakul, and they're like Reflector Mage, bounce it. And they're just like, or you're like Emrakul, and they're like Banishing Light, exile it.
Yeah.
Right? So there's like just more random things where you're like, I'm going to put in a 6/6, and then they have an Emrakul. And you're like, I didn't know you were an Emrakul deck. I'm like, yeah, I am now.
Put in like an Avenger to Zendikar, and then like crack an Evolving Wild, put 2 counters and all their stuff. And
you're like, oh no, I'm going to die now. Yeah. So show and tell, and same with like Eureka. Everyone's always like, Eureka's a trap in Vintage Cube. But, you just like play this blue-red tempo-y kind of control game, and then you just staple on a finisher. So is that finisher sneak attack with like 3 big things? Or is it twin?
Yep.
With like 4 or 5 like combo pieces?
Yeah.
Like, what is it going to be? So that's why blue-red is such a good place to start. Is like you can always find some way to win. And the best
end up a lot of different places.
Yeah, and the best blue and red cards are cheap, which is another important thing in Cube, right? Like, you want to use your mana every turn. You want to double spell as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you can go, like, Ponder...
I mean, it's just kind of, like,
Magic in general.
for limited in general, yeah.
Yeah, but, like, if you can, like, Ponder, improve your hand, then, like, next turn, like, Preordain, and then bolt something, right? Like, you've sculpted your hand, you've controlled, like, your opponent's board, and right, you're in a much better spot than, like, if you just were, like, 2-drop, 3-drop as you went. So, like, blue-red just gives you that. Now, I think Sneak Attack is, like, a first pickable card, because, like, that deck always ends up good, right? The Sneak Attack deck is always good.
Yeah.
Because, like, Sneak Attack can be red-green. Like, I could ramp into these things, or I could just put them into play for 1 mana. Right? Like, let's say you have a Terastodon, right?
Oh, yeah.
You put in a Terastodon for 1 mana, you blow up 3 of your things.
Yep.
Now, you attack them for 9, and you have 9 power left behind. That seems pretty good.
Yeah, right? I mean, at that point, you might even, like, blow up your own sneak attack.
Yeah, you might just like, I'm done with this. Like, okay, you can't keep up.
Yeah.
So, like, Sneak Attack, and then, like, Through the Breach as, like, the backup. Or, like, again, it depends on the cube, but, like, if someone's, like, super into, like, Sneak Attack or, like, Footsteps of the Goryo, right? Like, things that, like, bringing creatures into the battlefield, but then they die right away. You could have things like Wormcoil Engine in the cube.
Yeah.
Right? Or World Spine Worm.
Or wasn't there, like, 2 new ones from Commander?
Yeah,
something or other.
Yeah, the big artifact thing that dies into like 3 things, 3/3/3s, I think. Yeah, like you could have things like that where it's like, like there are like 6 different ways to like, or like 4 different ways to like put something into play, and it sacks at the end of turn. But like now there are these things that pay you off for them dying that are going to leave behind value. Right? So again, like that's where like drafting a cube multiple times can help, because you can be like, oh, I see, like I can like these cards go with this, right? As opposed to just looking for like the normal, like, oh, I have Sneak Attack, I want an Eldrazi. It's like, oh, I have Sneak Attack, I also want World Spine Worm. Like, oh, that's a great pick. So then there's kind of in the same vein of like, I want to play this 15-drop but not pay 15 mana for it. Reanimator. Yeah. So, Vintage Cube Reanimator is just the Legacy black-red Reanimator deck, or blue-black Reanimator deck.
Yeah, Grizzlebrand, Inkwell Leviathan.
Yeah, Gristlebrand, Inkwell Leviathan. I'm sure now Archon of Cruelty.
Yep.
And then you've got right. You have access to Entomb, Reanimate, Exhume, Animate Dead. You have Necromancy.
Yep, that's the one from Ice Age.
Yeah, Dance of the Dead. Oh gosh, what is it called? The 3 and a Makeshift Mannequin.
Oh yeah, yep.
So you've got like all these ways to bring cards back from your graveyard, and then you got Faithless Looting, Careful Study, other ways to get stuff into your graveyard, and you just like get big fatties and put them in the battlefield. Usually, you try to like clear the way with either counter spells, like to protect, or discard spells. So basically, you're just playing like
Reanimator.
The Legacy Reanimator deck, exactly. And this is another one where you want the deck to like be cohesive and make sense, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm gonna have, I could take Eliminate or Infernal Grasp, or there's a Collective Brutality. It's a worse removal spell, but it lets me discard a thing,
something for Reanimator.
Yeah, and can let me, duress my opponent.
Yeah.
Okay, like that's something that I need for my deck. Even though it's kind of a worse card as a removal spell, it does more of what your deck wants to do. So this is another one that you need it to be like cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also you could be like hard Reanimator, where like everything you're doing is geared towards Reanimator.
Yeah.
Or you can be, you could be like a blue-black control deck that just has
with a
like
Reanimator finish.
Yeah, with a Reanimator package. Oh, for the Storm people, we're gonna circle back real quick. I forgot like another part of the vintage Storm deck, and that is playing stuff out of your graveyard. So in most vintage cubes that have Storm, you're gonna have Past in Flames, which lets you play instants and sorceries from your graveyard, or you're gonna have Yawgmoth's Will, which lets you play anything from your graveyard.
Yeah.
But anything that goes to your graveyard new gets exiled. So
do they play Underworld Breach?
I don't know if they have Underworld Breach. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I don't remember if last year's version or if this year's version does. But like Yawgmoth's Will with like Lion's Eye Diamond, right? Lets you Lion's Eye Diamond or Black Lotus is just 0 mana for 3 mana.
Right.
With Yawgmoth's Will, especially like if you have like the win in your graveyard, like you early in the game cast the Tendrils for, for 3 to like buffer your life total, and now you can just be like, okay, I'm going to cast Yawgmoth's Will, hold priority, and crack a Lion's Eye Diamond, put my whole hand in my graveyard. Yawgmoth's Will resolves. Now I'm going to cast my entire graveyard and win the game that way.
Yep.
So that's another thing that's important. Now, the last thing is like kind of like you have here like classic staple cards that are just like in cubes.
Yeah. Real quick, I know we're kind of going a little long here, and I don't think this section will take super long, but so I think I had mentioned I haven't played nearly as much cube as you have. Were there any archetypes that I kind of missed on my quick recap list here, or was that pretty much everything?
I don't think, like, there's nothing that I'm like, oh, that's an archetype that I see, like, all the time.
Yeah.
Like, red-white is typically just, like, aggressive creature-y crap. And, like...
Well, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. That's what mono-red and mono-white both are.
Yeah, but there's nothing, like... The other thing, like, there can just be, like, just like the Arena Cube, you do get a lot of, like, 3, 4, and, like, 5 color, like, good stuff piles. They usually lean, like, towards the control side of things, where just kind of like modern Legacy, where it's just like, oh, well, what are the best... I have the best 4 white removal spells. I have the best 4 black removal spells. I have I have all these counter spells. I have some ramp from green. I can do whatever I want. Like, those exist, But for the most part, I think we hit like all like the high points. But right, it really depends on your cube. Like if you, so my cube has changed as we talked about it. So right, it's still a work in progress. But right, like if you want to make a cube and like your favorite draft archetype is green, black, tokens, what's his name? Slimefoot?
Yeah, Slimy Boy.
Yeah. And you're like, I love Slimefoot. I want to make sure I have Slimefoot in my cube. Right? You can just put Slimefoot in your cube, no questions asked. But you can be like, you know what, I want green black sapperlings. Or green black tokens to be an archetype in my cube. You can decide that the green black archetype is that. I guess green black in a lot of cubes is graveyard stuff, but it can be like anything you want. Right? If you're like, I loved Kaladesh and I want green black energy, right? And I'm going to have this like energy package of cards. If you draft them all, you end up with a really cool, good deck.
Well,
right?
I mean, it's kind of like what you did with your cube where you were able to put an artifact spin on like some of the other archetypes and include an archetype that wouldn't normally be viable. Yeah,
so it's like red, like blue-red is not usually, like, there's only 2 blue-red uncommons, well, 3 if you count Whirler Virtuoso, that like say the word artifact on them.
Right.
But I was like, oh, like blue-red artifacts because I want to have like kind of an affinity like sub-theme. Right. So, all right, I'm going to like make a bunch of Thopters and then have blue and red affinity payoffs. Okay. Like you can do kind of whatever you want. So just because like, you know, if you're like, you know what, I want blue white to be an artifacts thing. That's perfectly fine. That's been an archetype in a couple draft formats.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you can just like cobble it together however you want and get to that archetype. So don't feel like these are the classic archetypes. Because like in my cube I put Storm because I really enjoy Storm.
Yeah.
Right. I'm no good at it, but I really enjoy it. Right. So cool. I have Storm. But I had to give something else up. But that was something I was like, I want to make sure this cube has support for Storm. Because I know that's the thing that people want to draft. Right. But you're like, you know what? I want red-black to be, you know, red-black sacrifice. Or like I made mine red-black goblins. Right. Which has really only been like a draft archetype like twice. Or like 3 times. So it's like Modern Horizons 1 gave us Munitions Expert. And then like the other place that there's a lot of black goblins is Lorwyn block.
Yeah.
Right? So like it's a combination of some like Lorwyn goblins, right? Because I had a bunch of like red token makers and they all made goblins. And so I was like, oh, there's a black goblin lord. There's some other things that like in black that like make or sacrifice goblins. Right? Perfect. Like, yeah, perfect. I have an archetype and like you can like steal from things, right? You can be like, well, I'm the red-black goblins deck, but I also have Bastion of Remembrance and I have Morbid Opportunist. So these cards that are like sack a goblin, like Skirk Prospector, so I can sack all my goblins and deal you damage and generate some mana. Right? Like, so you can like, they kind of work together. Like I have all this fodder in red, and I have a few of the black payoffs that would be for like the best possible white-black deck. And I have all these goblins payoffs. Oh, hey, this all works together. But yeah, like if you're making it, like you don't have to like have all the archetypes that you see. Like you can just be like, what are the things I enjoy? What are the things that I want to like play with?
I think like the questions that I had about archetypes were mainly, I don't think necessarily for people building their own cube, but for people like sitting down to play other people's cubes.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, what are some common archetypes?
Yeah, and
that you can reasonably expect to sit down at. And I think we covered most of them.
Yeah. And like, I think that it's perfectly fair that if you like go to like draft a cube, you could just ask the person like, hey man, what are the archetypes? And they're going to tell you like, oh yeah, like I've got,
they're honestly probably going to go into way more detail than you want.
And you'd be like, yo, pump the brakes. So you said green, white is go wide tokens? Check. Okay, moving on. Right. Yeah. Also, like, I had mentioned like Ivy Lane Denizen in my cube and like the fact it's just there for shenanigans. Like I don't have Splinter Twin, but I have various like kind of mainly 3-card, but there are some 2-card versions depending on what you get of like, hey, you can like put this enchantment on a thing and make something like arbitrarily large, or like Scurry Oak and any way to gain life, and then one of like 3 ways that when you gain life you put a counter on something. You just like make infinite squirrels.
Yeah.
Or like I had Lurking Roper, the 3-mana 4/5 that doesn't untap unless you gain life.
Yeah.
Where you can put something of the goad. Presence of the Goad, I think is what it is, or Gond.
Gond.
Where you tap and you make a 1/1.
Yeah.
Well, if you have something if you have a Soul Warden effect, then you get to untap your Roper, and you get to make infinite.
And then you get to tap it.
Yeah, and you get to tap. You get to make infinite things. So like, it's like, oh, so if you see Presence of the Goad and Lurking Roper, you're like, okay, there must be like a Soul Warden in here, and an Essence Warden, and maybe like one other card, so I can like put all this together.
In general, if you see a Lurking Roper, you kind of know something's up because that card's kind of bad otherwise.
The card's bad, yeah. Yeah, but it's like, but there are different ways, like, so, there are different weird synergies that you can, like, put in your cube that, like, don't have to just be like, oh, everyone knows Splinter Twin and Pestermite. It's like, okay, like, here's kind of build your own bad version of Splinter Twin Pestermite. Or, the number of things that, like, sack a thing, do, like, Goblin Bombardment plus... Ivy Lane Denizen and Kitchen Finks. Infinite damage, infinite life.
Yep.
Or the one you had me put in, what is the red-green enchantment? Rhythm of the Wilds?
Rhythm of the Wilds, yep.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, Rhythm of the Wilds plus a persist thing, and then a sack outlet. So, like, if you, again, same, like, sack outlet, like, okay, there's some red-green, you can, like, kill someone that way. Or you can Skirk Prospector and Putrid Goblin and like be in Jund. And hey, guess what? I make infinite mana that way. Mana. Yeah. Yep. So there's any number of like weird hidden things, and like the more you draft the cube, or like, and you see someone do it to you, or you see someone from across the table, you're like, oh, that's neat. I should do that. And I think that's part of the fun of cube is like discovering those things.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's something that like gets lost in modern Magic, right after like the first week, sometimes the first like day, like oh,
everything's figured out.
Best draft archetype is blue-black. Here's how you draft it. Here are the cards you're looking for, and you get like a week and a half of just like YOLOing that like 9 out of 10 deck every single draft.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, like I didn't discover this, but like it feels really good when you like haven't been paying attention and you like have just drafted blue-black 4 times in a row because you figured out on your own, like, oh man, like every time I play against blue-black, I get wrecked. So like these are the cards that were really good against me, and like you put that deck together in your head. I think Cube gives you a chance to do that where you're like, oh, like these are the things that go together. Because like a lot of times they're there.
Right.
Right? You're like, they wouldn't put Lurking Roper in here. Right? Like the same cube that has Lurking Roper shouldn't also have Swords to Plowshares. Those cards are on 2 wildly different power levels. Right? So Lurking Roper's doing a job.
Yeah.
It's not just like awful card. It's an awful card with purpose. Right? So like just like those kind of things where you're like, oh, why is this here? Let me figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, and that's fun. So that is also a sales pitch for like, all right, tell me what the archetypes are, but don't tell me anything else. right? I want to find all the weird, like, sideways stuff you put in here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to just get, like, dumpstered because I think that, like, red-black is sacrifice, and then, like, I don't take the stupid goblin things, and it was goblins the whole time.
It's always goblins.
Yeah. But, like, hopefully, you know, much like in a regular draft, like, there's signpost uncommons, or signpost gold cards, and you're like, oh, like, there are 3 blue-white cards that are, like, that, like, ETB and do a thing. And then there are 2 that, like, blink something.
I wonder what blue-white is.
I wonder what blue-white is. But there's also, like, you know, Azoria's Charm and some, like, blue-white, like, controlling things. It's like, oh, these are... I've got my blinky stuff, and then I've got my stuff to support my control archetype, and maybe, like, 1 or 2, like, generically good cards. Like, oh, there's a Faithful Mending. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, this makes sense. Or you're like, okay, red-black has good removal because it's red and black, but it also has Munition Expert. I bet you there's some goblins going on. So there's just all, like, it's like getting the context clues as well.
Yeah. I have one more quick topic to throw in here before we start talking about some, like, staple cards. And that is that if you are putting a cube together, a lot of what we just talked about are legacy and vintage cubes, which have some very expensive cards in them. Like, the cube format is almost never a sanctioned format, and people don't expect you to have, like, actual Black Lotus in your cube and let other people touch it.
Yeah, they expect you to have a house and organs.
Yeah. So proxy all of it.
Yeah. What did you say, that you can print 600 cards for $100?
Yeah, I can print an entire cube for $100 shipped to my door.
Yeah. And, like, that is, you know, like, I'm doing a peasant cube and going through, I have, I don't know, 450 to 500 of the cards myself already. So it's like, I'm just going to, like, have the whole thing. Right. Yeah. But if I was, like, if I wanted to have the vintage cube, right? Like, we played for years with a vintage cube that was sleeves and, like, islands and pieces of paper, like, with the cards printed out. Like, I remember sitting in the shop with a pair of scissors, cutting out cards.
Yeah, some of them were not very good quality either. You really couldn't read some of them.
Yeah, but, like, still was fun.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony, again, bringing up Anthony, a better be loyal listener of the show. We practiced for a sealed GP with proxies. Yeah. We would go to a sealed deck generator. We would, like, make, like, really bad, like, pen and paper proxies, and then play decks. And, like, after the 3rd night of this, he was like, wow, this does really work. Right? It's good enough. Like, you can know what the cards do and you can do the thing.
Yep.
And so, like, you still get that same experience. So yeah, for the love of God, do not, like, be like, hey, I'm just gonna buy the vintage cube.
Yeah, but like the one card that kind of stuck out in my mind was, you mentioned Eureka.
Yes.
Like, Eureka's in the cube only to trap people.
Yes.
Well, Eureka's like $1,000 card.
Yes. And that's another thing, right? Like, sure, you could start with the Magic Online Vintage Cube as, like, your starting point. Yeah. And, like, there's part of me that, like, I think, like, I should go back and look at the Magic Online Vintage Cube because, like, that's what I want my cube to kind of play like. And, like, you know, make some adjustments to, like, get it closer to that. But, like, you could start with that and be like, I'm going to proxy this, but there are things I don't like. Like, I don't want Eureka in my cube because I know it's just a trap. I can put literally anything else there. Or, like, I want these 3 reanimation targets as opposed to these 3. I can do that. right?
Yeah, or like it's something to work towards too. Like, I mean, you can obviously, just take out the power and not worry about it, but you can, work towards getting real copies of the cards, or work towards getting real copies of some of the cards, and replace the ones that you're not going to buy with something similar. Like I know it's cheap now, but for a long time, Natural Order was really expensive. Like, if you're not going to put a Natural Order in, like, swap it out with a Green Suns.
Yeah. Not that Green Suns is cheap now.
Oh, really? It's not?
It's like $30 or something last time I looked.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I was like, why? I might be wrong, but I just remember thinking, like, I'm like, it's like, I'm glad I have this. But yeah, like you can do like work towards something. Market price is 25.
Oh, okay. Well, Natural Order is 16, so
yeah, better. Like you can work towards something, or like you can use the Vintage Cube as your starting point for your like proxy cube and be like, you know what? Mm-hmm. I love Thunderbreak Regent. Mm-hmm. That was my favorite card from Dragons. I want Thunderbreak Regent in my cube, and take out whatever like random 4-drop.
Yep.
I mean, I don't have any Pitiless Plunderers because I've sold them because they're a $13 uncommon.
Jeez.
And you had suggested putting Pitiless Plunder in. And I did. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to spend $13 on this card. So let me, like, I'm going to cut this 3-drop and put in a 3-drop that, like, I don't know, does like 20% of Pitiless Plunder. And I'm going to put another 4-drop. There we go, done. Because I'm not going to spend $13 on this card.
Yep.
So, like, stuff like that where you're just like, you know what? I can move stuff around and get, like, most of the experience with, like, none of the, like, awful cost of some of these cards.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, and I had mentioned before, like, Cube Cobra, mm-hmm. and I don't know. There are I don't know other sites like Cube Tutor used to exist, but it went away. So Cube Cobra is the one I know. I'm sure there are other ones.
Yeah, I think that's the big one now.
But you can go just like click around and like find a cube that sounds interesting and draft it. Like you'll draft against bots,
mm-hmm.
but you can just draft a cube. And like
and actually, like those people appreciate it too because it lets them know like what archetypes people are drafting and what the decks look like.
Mm-hmm. Like I get happy when I see like, oh, 2 people drafted your cube, and so I'll go like see what they drafted.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think it's awkward though. I feel bad for the person when like I get a notification after I spent like 30 minutes like changing all the lands in the deck. I'm like, well, that was one experience. There is now a different experience for you to have. But yeah, like you can go like draft cubes, and like you want to when you're done have like a cohesive deck that you can say this deck is the control deck, is the sacrifice deck, is the whatever deck. Yeah. Because those are going to be better than just like, I've got 12 removal spells and 10 creatures and 2 planeswalkers. Let's go. It's like, well, it's probably not going to work out super well for you, but we can give it a go. Yep. The other thing you can't do is you can't play them. I did find, I'll have to find, it's on my phone. I don't know if I sent it to you. This person on like GitHub.
Yeah, you mentioned something.
Yeah. Had this whole thing where he's like, here's a website that you can use to do live 8-person drafts. You can load a cube into it, do a live 8-person draft. It spits out like a notepad or something, or like it spits out the deck list. And then you can send that to the person who owns the cube on Magic Online, and they can trade you the cards.
That's cool.
Then you can pair against the 8 people you played against in Magic Online, do your cube draft, and then send the cards back to the person at the end.
That's pretty cool.
And that's why I was like, if we could figure out Magic Online, like that would be like a fun way to like, we'd have to buy the cards, but with the way Magic Online prices are, Lord only knows. But hopefully, like, the cube I have together isn't too expensive. Yeah. And, like, that might be something we could do. Like, we put it together, and we're just like, all right, like...
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I haven't logged in a while, but I think I saved the login for the CasualTryHardMTG Magic Online account. If not, I'm sure I could figure it out.
I think the information is in our Google Drive.
There we go. But, like, so, like, there are ways for you to, like, if you, like, make a cube, you know, just, like, in, like, hey, you have 8 friends. Hey, can you guys draft my cube on this site so, like, I can see how it drafts?
Yeah.
Like, that would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And if you don't get to play the games, you can, like, look at the decks that come out, right? And you know, you're going to get a better draft than if you have, like, you and 7 bots.
Right.
Because some of the cube tutor bots, I'm just like, what are you doing? How many beers deep were you when you were doing this?
Too many.
Too many beers. All right. So we're pretty deep, but we can run through some of these pretty quick.
Yeah,
so
this shouldn't take long.
We've got our classics, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to go through some of, like, the staple cards you find in, like, lots and lots and lots and lots of cubes. Cubes are kind of like a love letter to Magic, so to speak. Whoever built the cube is going to put in a lot of their favorite cards. So a lot of these staple cards are just kind of like long beloved Magic cards, things that people enjoy casting, enjoy playing with. Normally they're pretty good cards. Sometimes they're not, but they're just cards that people love. So I just kind of picked a couple from each color, and we can kind of run through them real quick here. For white, I had Thalia, the 2-drop, like, original Thalia, Flicker Wisp, Resto Angel, and Swords to Plowshares.
Like, you know, you have, like, the best taxing creature.
Yep.
Like, one of the original, like, Flicker effects, right, in Flicker Wisp.
Yep.
Like we talked about before, Resto Angel, generically good thing. And Swords, hopefully still the best removal spell.
It's got some stiff competition. Another card that, like, I don't have in my cube because I've never understood the fascination with it, but, like, is, like, in a bunch of cubes is Cloud Goat Ranger. Yeah.
Like, that card's just, like, always in cubes. It's like a 5-mana 3/3 that makes 2, like, 1/1 goats or something, or 3 goats. And you can, like, tap the goats to give it flying. It's just a card that's just, like, always in cubes. That people are just like, I'm making a cube, it has to have Cloud Goat Ranger in it.
Sure.
In blue, we have Foff, Fact or Fiction.
Something you said wasn't in your cube, right?
Yeah, like, I have hieroglyphic illuminations that might be going away.
Yeah.
I think it is.
It's just a fun card to cast.
Yeah, and, like, you can get Fact or Fiction in Old Border. Yes, please.
Yes.
Mole Drifter, like, it's so 5 mana for a 2/2 that enters the battlefield and draws you 2, but it has Evoke for 2 and a blue. So it's like a Divination or a Divination plus a 2/2 flyer.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say it flies too. I think you skipped over that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it's a good thing if you have, like, Ephemerate or other, like, flickery effects in your cube. Right. Like, it's, like, the best thing to flicker.
Yep. Flicker it, draw 2, get whatever bonuses you have.
Yeah. Brainstorm's a weird one. Brainstorm's typically not great in cube.
Yeah.
Because what makes Brainstorm good, right, is
the ability to shuffle.
Yeah, you look at 3, you put 2 back. So, like, if you have Brainstorm in your deck, you want to make sure you, like, prioritize fetch lands or ways to shuffle your deck. So, like, in my cube, I made sure there's 3 ways to shuffle your deck in the land slot.
Yeah.
Which isn't a ton, but if you have Brainstorm, like, you should prioritize getting things like Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Ash Barrens. Right? Those are the things that you need to get. You're like, okay, now I can shuffle. Or some other way to shuffle, whether it be like, you know, I'm going to Brainstorm and then I'm going to cast a Rampant Growth and clear the top. You always want to try to pair it with a shuffle effect. But I mean, it is still just like generically good card.
It's a card people love to cast too.
Yeah. Okay, next one is...
I guess you could throw in like all of the cantrips there. Ponder, Preordain.
Opt, Consider, like all of them. Yeah. But like the big ones, Ponder, Preordain, and Brainstorm. Like if you're making a blue archetype in Cube, like you're kind of starting with like those 3 cards and like Counterspell.
Yep.
Like those are like the quintessential like blue cards. And then you're just like, okay, I'm going to do other stuff around this.
Mm-hmm.
For black... we have your boy, Dark Confidant.
Yeah, Bob.
Cube is the only place you will ever see someone flip an Emrakul to a Dark Confidant.
And probably be happy about it.
I mean, it has totally hit. There's lots of people. I think LSV, there's a video of him flipping an Emrakul to a Dark Confidant.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's one of the things that's like, well... as the card says, greatness at any cost.
Sometimes that cost is 15 life.
Let's go. Dark Ritual, right? Yeah. Again, like...
definitely a staple.
It's a staple, like, all the way back from Alpha, right? It goes in the Storm deck and also in that mono black deck, right? You know, playing a Phyrexian Obliterator on turn 2 probably wins you the game.
Ritual, the Hypnotic Spectre.
Yeah. Definitely have Hypnotic Spectre in on the cube list. I have to find a version that is old enough to be correct, but not so old that Gavin can't eat. There's a fine line. There's a fine line. It's like, I would like a beta one, but I don't have like $400 for it. Like 4th edition sounds real nice.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, you add it to the list. I'll make you one.
Okay. Thoughtseize?
Yeah, kind of any of the discard spells, I guess, would fit into this slot. Thoughtseize, Inquisition, whatever.
Yeah. Duress. I only have one black discard spell, which might be a mistake. I have a lot more removal. I have Duress.
Yeah.
Like, Inquisition seems narrow, and Thoughtseize is a rare, so it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
again, you're probably right.
It's hard though, so it's just like a bunch of removal. That's
you could do like any of the off-brand Duresses, like Divest or what was the other one?
Yeah, I mean you could do the 2-mana ones as well, like Agonizing Remorse or something. Yeah, I do have what is it called? Oh god, what is it called? I have Thought Erasure.
Yeah.
All right, so in red, Goblin Guide, the like if you see someone Goblin Guide you, you know exactly what's happening. Yeah. You're like,
if you see a Goblin Guide in a pack, like, you know what's up.
Yeah. Right? Like, if you take a Goblin Guide, you know what you're supposed to do, and it's not like, go Goblin Guide into Delver. No. You only want mountains. Only mountains, let's go. Lightning Bolt, classic.
Yep.
Sneak Attack. I guess other, like, Inferno Titan is one of those cards that just shows up in the cube that like you're like, why is this here? Like usually they have, like in the vintage cube, they have all of the Titans.
Would you play Inferno Titan over the Red Cavalier?
I don't know now.
Yeah.
I think, and this is like one of those things that keeps, I think that Inferno Titan gets grandfathered in because it's Inferno Titan.
Probably.
And it's been like a cube staple for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely some cards in the cube that you're like, oh gosh, what is it called? Oh, the first, like the red-white hybrid, like level up creature.
Oh, yeah.
What is his name? Anyway, like that card's not great.
Right.
But it's just like always in the cube.
Yep.
Same with like Student of Warfare.
I don't even know what that card is.
It's from Zendikar. It has level up. It's like a 1-mana 1/1, and you level it up, and it gets like first strike and like +1/+1. And like on level 3, it's like a 5/5 double striker. Like it just gets huge, but it's just like like if you see it, it's like, okay, like we're mono whiting here, but it's just one of those cards that's not great. It feels like there's like better options, but it's just always there.
Yeah.
So it's
Figure of Destiny.
Figure of Destiny. There we go.
Yeah.
Right, but like that's a card that's just like always in the cube, and you're like, why are you here? But it's like, oh, because you've been in the cube for 12 years, and there's someone who has drafted you every year for 12 years that'll be super bummed if you're not here.
Yep.
And like part of the cube is like giving the people what they want. Right?
How big is the vintage cube? Is it a 540 or
it's
is
540.
it 720? Is it?
It's 540. I'm almost positive it's 540. So like it's pretty tight, like what they have to like
work with,
yeah. So here are the vintage cubes updates from so they've got to like get some stuff in, but like the new and they're like, hey, these cards are new and improved from the update. They're improved because they now actually work. Because what card is it? Wheel of Misfortune?
Didn't work on Magic Online?
You're not supposed to know how much life your opponent bids. And it would just tell you.
Oh.
So like it's like whoever bids the most life gets to draw 7.
Yeah.
And it would just tell you like what it was.
One more than that.
Yes. I say one more, good sir. I hate how this is organized. So Student of Warfare, it's a 1-mana 1/1. It becomes a 3-mana... Sorry, it becomes a 1-mana 3/3 first strike with a level up cost of white, and it's on level 2 that you get the 3/3. And then on level 7, it's a 4/4 double strike.
Okay.
But it's one of those cards you're like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Like, how did you earn this spot? I'm like flipping through the Magic Online cube list now. But like, okay, for example, Faithbound Judge. That is not a vintage cube power level card.
No.
But is it from the new set? And we got to move packs?
That's right.
Bro.
Maybe they'll like playing with it and buy packs.
Yeah, exactly. Bro, maybe they'll like it. Right? Yeah, God, there's a lot of stuff I don't have in my cube. So many things. I've done such a bad job.
You're doing a fine job.
But yeah. So like there are just things that are just like I've been here forever, so I get to stay.
Yeah.
So in green, we have Birds of Paradise, but like basically you get all the 1-mana mana dorks.
Yeah. Llanowar Elf, Elvish Mystic, Arbor Elf, Finhorn Elf,
Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, Avacyn's Pilgrim.
Yep.
You even get Elves of Deep Shadow?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
You get both of the hierarchs.
Yes. Noble and Ignoble. Eternal Witness. Again, like a classic.
Yeah.
Sylvan Library. Another one of those cards. It's just like really good and has always been around.
Yep.
For the mana rocks, you get Soul Ring. A card that we knew deep down was good when we played it in 1994. But we didn't understand how good.
My original Sol Ring has the where to prove it, too.
Yeah. Solemn Simulacrum.
Sad Robot.
Just a, like, he's just always there. Umezawa's Jite. And, like, swords. And the different swords, again, like, you can get your, like, any number of creatures can wear it. Your elves can wear your sword and become useful. Yeah. Your, like, white creatures can wear a sword. Anything can wear a sword.
Yep. And a lot of times it's not all of the swords either. It's just, like, the good ones.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be all of them.
Right.
Just, like, usually, like are we up to, like, 8 now? I think, like, probably 4 or 5 are, like...
Yeah.
Are worthy of the cube.
Mm-hmm.
And then... Sensei's Divining Top. which is there in like it's not nearly as terrible as it is in whatever it is in Legacy. And then you have like Winter Orb, but like I guess Winter Orb is kind of like with a package. You have like Winter Orb, Tangle Wire, Smokestack. You have like these stacks resource denial style decks that are supported with these artifacts.
Sometimes, I mean, a lot of people don't like these either, so they'll leave them out of their cubes. But some people really like playing them.
So, so you have a lot that you can like work with, and just looking at the like I have it up on Cube Tutor because like it's easier to read than the Magic Online version. Yeah, like they have like for green, right? There's Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elves, Gilded Goose, Draga Tree Speaker, Llanowar Elves. So you get all those 1-mana mana dorks. The only other 1-mana card is Hex Drinker. Mm-hmm. And then at 2 mana, is like Devoted Druid, Raphellos, Sylvan Caryatid, and Wall of Roots. Just more mana ramp. Yeah. Right. So it's like all, and then like even like Circle of Dreams Druid at 3 mana. Yeah. And so you just like, oh, like we know what we came here to do. Yep. And then like, why on earth is there Magus of the Order? Get that garbage out of here. Like, do they still have Natural Order? Okay, good. I was like, you better like still have Natural Order because like that is not okay.
And Green Suns and Finale.
Yeah. Wow, I'm looking at the number of creatures in all of the different colors. I have way more creatures in my cube. There are only 25 blue creatures in the Vintage Cube. There are no 1-drops in the Vintage Cube. In blue. Yeah. And there are only 23 black creatures.
Wow. That's surprising.
It is. Like
this is heavy hitters though.
Yeah. But it's just like, Carphonaut and Pack Rat at 2. But it's just like, oh. But then you have like Bone Shredder. Like Bone Shredder, for those of you who are the uninitiated. Yeah. For the people that aren't 40. Or 35, let's say. Bone Shredder, 2 and a black for a 1/1 flyer. With Echo, 2 and a black. So you have to pay its casting cost the next upkeep. Enters the battlefield and kills target non-black, non-artifact creature. Mm-hmm. Card is not 2022 playable.
No, definitely not.
But it's been in the cube probably since the first cube was made. Right? Like, if the first cube was made after Urza's Legacy, Bone Shredder was in the cube. Yep. And so it's just one of those cards. It's like, we're making the cube again. Yeah, cool, Bone Shredder. And that's just like it. So... Now, granted, there are some things that have like taken some spots, like Nighthawk Scavenger took the spot long held by Vampire Nighthawk. Yeah, so there's been some like changes over time, but it's mostly stuff that like okay, like they have Dreadfast Demon from Val. Which,
I actually kind of like that card.
So do I. I don't know. Like, is it like... It's like Grizzlebrand, Archon of Cruelty, Shieldred, Dreadfast Demon, Massacre Worm, Grave Titan. Which one of these things is not like the others?
Yeah, it's true.
Could it be Dreadfast Demon?
Yeah. Would you like to turn your Archon of Cruelty into a Dreadfast Demon?
No, thank you, sir.
No, I would not.
No, I would not. So, yeah, like cubes are a lot of fun. I know it's not the what's it called? The easiest thing to get 8 people together right now. Yeah. But like even going like I went on the Cube Tutor, I like looked at the like explore cubes and like right at the top was like the MTGO Vintage Cube updated list. Like, you could go do, like, practice drafts of that to just see, like, what it's like.
Yeah.
So, well, I think with all of this, I think we have a show.
Yeah, I think so, too.
So, if you have cube questions or you're, like, interested in, like, messing around with, like, all things cube, or you have more questions, you can tweet at us at CasualTryPod.
Yeah, you could also hit us up on Facebook at CasualTryHardMTG, or you can email us, show@CasualTryHardMTG.com. I'm sure at some point after we get a chance to draft Brian's cube, whenever that is, we'll have some more content maybe focused on Brian's cube. But yeah, like Brian said, if you guys got any more questions about cube or any more questions in general, really make sure you hit us up. We always like hearing from you guys. And if you're looking to pick up any singles, we would appreciate it if you used our TCG player affiliate link, tcg.casualtryhardmtg.com. Follow that link. Whatever you purchase, we'll get a small cut of to help keep the show going. And if you guys want to support us a little bit more directly, you can do so at patreon.com/casualtryhardmtg. Throw a couple bucks in the pot. You get access to our pre-show, access to our show notes, and I'll put you on my mailing list whenever I get around to doing another batch, probably the end of February. I'll probably send the next batch out. So make sure you hop in there, help support the show, help keep the show going, and get a little something back. Also, we have our Discord, link in the description, link on all our social media. Make sure you join in there. It's another place for you to ask questions. It's a good place for you to post up if you need help with like a deck that you're working on, if you want some pointers, or if you have like a rules question, or really anything in general. Check out Discord, join in. I think that's all I got for today. You got anything else?
Nope. So with that, I think we got a show. Oh no, wait, that's the wrong one. No,
yeah, we already did that one.
We'll catch you on the internet.
We'll catch you on the internets.